Hey, Latin 3. So this is going to be a little weird because when I get this video done, it's going to be titled Ablatives Part 3. Weird because, in fact, I have not made or even attempted to make Ablatives Part 2. But Ablatives Part 1 is the ablatives that I have already made, things that Latin 1 kids need to know about, and at some point I will make an Ablatives Part 2 that is what Latin 2 kids need to know about. Right now, I want to focus this video on specifically those new ablatives that we have not talked about for level 3, the ones that are not review, which there's sort of 4-ish that we need to cover, and they're kind of interesting in as much as some of them actually kind of get really to the kind of basic heart of what an ablative is. I mean, when you break down the word ablative, you find out that it's ab and lat, which is to say the supine stem of alfero. The verb means to take away. So the ablative is the taking away case. And so what that means is that one of the most basic senses of what the ablative is for is to show separation. And despite that, the ablative of separation, which is totally a thing, is not ever described in your Ecce Romani 1 or 2 books. I think it exists in the index in the back, but it's not something we ever really talk about. But a really good example of the ablative of separation is the fact that while I'm on my way into my friend's apartment, just like I was in the last ablative video, to use her good internet to upload this video, I am also delivering her coffee because she has been deprived of good coffee. And so coming through and, helping out like a bro, right? But yeah, to be deprived of something is to be separated from it. And so along with that verb of deprivation, you would also have an ablative, all right? And it's not just deprivation, like verbs of freedom, for instance, because anytime you are freed from something, you are being separated from it. So use the ablative. Similar deal if you were talking about lacking something, sometimes even like needing something, but needing in the sense of lacking it. Those are things that require the ablative because you are in fact separated from it. Even some earlier ablatives that we have talked about actually do overlap with this. I mean, the ablative place from which sounds a lot like this too, right? Because you always use it with ab, ex, or de, words that mean from. Right? And certainly when you, move away from something, seems like you'd be talking about separation. Although, that may not be the best way to describe the ablative place from which, because in those senses, you're moving away from a place of origin. And another one of the really basic things the ablative does is show origin. So, second ablative to talk about here is the ablative of origin. Now, again, you could view the place from which is a Latin 1 ablative, as an ablative of origin, but you can also view the ablative of cause as an ablative of origin as well. Place from which and cause are basically just more specific versions of the ablative of origin. The thing is not all origins are places or causes. For example, sometimes you use the ablative of origin to name somebody's parents, because their parentage is the origin of their existence. It's literally a thing, right? So, something you might see is, so-and-so was born from, parent X and parent Y. Which is not the way we phrase things like that in English, but it is the way they do it in Latin. So we got the ablative of separation, the ablative of origin. There is also such a thing as the ablative of description. This is one that, again, I'm pretty sure it is referenced or mentioned somewhere in your glossary or index of your previous textbooks, but never something we went over. And that would be like for me to say something like the coffee that I've delivered to my friend is of very high quality. If I wanted to say that the coffee is of high quality, I could do that with an ablative of description, and it'll always be a 2-word phrase, typically, an ablative noun and an ablative adjective. And I gotta say, of all of these ones that we haven't talked about, this is one of the ones I like less, because it sounds really kind of genitive-y, right? To say that the coffee is of high quality sounds like something that you might use a genitive to do, and actually the genitive of description does also exist, and we have seen it. But some authors, hey, just because some authors prefer the ablative of description, it's literally the same thing, just with an ablative instead of a genitive. And that gets to the very last one. So let's say you've got a sentence and you have an ablative in there, and you know that it is not any of the Latin 1 ablatives. You know that it's not any of the Latin 2 ablatives. It's not an absolute, it's not price, it's not comparison or anything like that. And as you think about it, it's not really showing separation. It's not showing a point of origin or a source of something. And it's not a description. It could also be something known as an ablative of specification. Yes, there is something just known as an ablative of specification. So, like, a real simple example of this might be how I am nearly blind in my left eye. All right? I mean, that's probably a little exaggerated. I'm not nearly blind, but my vision in my left eye is very, very poor. But specifically, in my left eye. That's not a location per se, and it's not any of those other things the ablative does. It's just a way to specify the way in which I am almost blind, right? Even if that is an exaggeration. And so, yeah, sometimes you can have an ablative that literally just makes something more specific. And again, you can see sort of similarities here, how it's not so different from, say, like an ablative of place, where, time, when. But if you're dealing with something that kind of feels like it might be like a place, where, time, when, but it's not a place or a time, well, then if you need an answer and nothing more specific will do, then you can say the ablative of specification, all right? Now, I know that's kind of a lot of information with not a lot of examples. Don't worry, when I post this online, I will accompany, wherever I end up posting a link to the video, I'll accompany more examples, especially when it comes to, like, things like various verbs that you could expect to show separation with, or even some other examples of source or origin. Like, for instance, I didn't mention material here. The source or origin of something might be a material that it's made from. So I'll definitely post examples up so you can see those and be a little more tangible with them. But that's kind of the overarching explanation of what those ablatives are that we haven't gotten to, just because honestly they're a little more vague than some of the easier ones and less common. But that's true of all the new grammar in level 3. If it were super common, we would have learned it in level 1. Anyway, I'll see you guys tomorrow and the next day and for a while, unless, of course, you're watching this in the future. And then who knows if I'll see you. But yeah, hopefully that's helpful, and I will talk to you later.